Heavily armed and armored with state-of-the-art laser weapons, scanner eyes, you name it. It is a weapon, a robot of artificial intelligence designed for war. It is a Terminator, if you will, designed to kill. But when lightning strikes one unit while still hooked to the generator, unit number 5 becomes alive and a light-hearted comedy ensues. Only in 1986. This is Steve Guttenberg, Fisher Stevens, Ali Sheedy, Short Circuit. That's right, number 5 is alive, or so he protests. He goes off mission, escapes from the United States military. The crazy crackpots, as they are depicted, that are hoping to strap nuclear weapons to him and send him down the streets of Moscow in a last-ditch effort should nuclear war come. If we were all wiped out, at least the robots would get the last gotcha. This and the cool laser beam sequence at the beginning, destroying old, used, surplus military equipment as part of a demonstration, is supposed to highlight just how valuable they are. This is state-of-the-art stuff. 5 robots. They're built for just over $11 million each. That I don't know that you can supply a toolbox with a hammer in the government fashion today for $11 million. Also, of course, we find out in the course of the franchise, he has so much memory capacity that Johnny 5 upgrades himself to 500 megabytes by the... Okay. Short Circuit is one of those classic films that it was so popular in the moment. Everybody was talking about it. It was super cool. It was state of the art. It is impossible to recapture that we were able to believe based on our limited understanding of what technology was available at the time, that a glorified calculator, 1/1000th the strength of the phone that is recording this right now, somehow became alive because of an electrical glitch and can do all the things that Johnny 5 does. Just the speaking and interacting, if it had that level of intelligence, it just couldn't do that with what was available. But we didn't know. This was the era of a lot of bad science fiction where you could just spout out random things about galaxies and universes, and people didn't understand what the construct of the universe was, and so it went over most people's heads, and it all sounded plausible. Did it sound plausible? It totally sounded plausible, especially when you're a young kid, you're watching this, you're excited about the future, about technology. Robots are cool. This is a funny version of the Terminator, but it all made it seem very much within our grasp. Not a robot from the future, not a robot from another planet sent by aliens, not in that sort of science fiction realm, but it was meant to be in the present. We built this, the highest tech thing that we could develop, and we lost control of it. It is Frankensteinian. It is within all of the paranoia of the Cold War. It is within all the beginnings of Terminator, Skynet type of paranoia of what we will build in the future. But he gives us a very optimistic version of that with Johnny 5 just being so cool, being fun-loving. He's the robot that, becoming alive, decides to cherish life. He regrets accidentally stepping on a grasshopper, disassembling something that can't be reassembled. He is essentially a pacifist, even though he was built by the Defense Department. And that kind of makes the fact that he's cruising around with a laser beam, able to destroy tanks with a single blast, that somehow is less threatening. The first one does this really well. I don't know if any one of the current generations could go back, watch that, and get the feel of it, because you'd never get over. It'd be so hard to get past the goofiness. They don't even remember a time when that technology was cutting edge or futuristic enough to bring in a sufficient state of suspension of disbelief to make it even viable. On the other hand, it is a sort of, in its own amusing way, it is a profound expression about life that even though you've built this thing to be destructive, that now that it's become alive doesn't mean that it will be. It's sort of the anti-Terminator, the opposite idea of what Skynet would become. We know our own human frailties, and it's very hard to believe that things built by us will not run amok. We know what power does to us. Something by definition we've built that has access to be more powerful than us. We have no idea what to think about that other than to fear what it would become, because we know what such a situation does to we, and we have made it in our image. Johnny Five is the optimistic take. He's the one that cherishes life, wants his own life to be recognized and cherished. Of course, he falls in with Ali Sheedy's character, who is escaping from an abusive boyfriend as we meet her and sort of throughout the film trying to keep that jerk away. But she rescues animals. She cherishes living things. She's excited to meet Johnny, thinking that he's an alien. Doesn't believe at first that he's alive, of course, but falling in with someone that cherishes life, wants to comfort, help, rescue. It ends up being naturally well thought out to create her as a plot point and to have her be one of the characters in this mix. And of course, our two technicians, Fisher Stevens and Steve Guttenberg, who just cannot believe that it is alive. It takes them a while to figure it out. And of course, the crackpot military is running around trying to destroy it for reasons that are not real clear why they wouldn't be more keen to acquire it back, unless some of the soldiers seem to feel maybe it is a threat to their future control of the global conflict they think that is coming. Only their boss on the technical side knows the value of this $11 million piece of equipment. Like, let's get it back. Overall, it's an enjoyable film. It's got a lot of entertainment value. There's a lot of comedy. There's a lot of great stuff in it. You have to overlook Fisher Stevens playing an Indian, which, I am not in favor of any woke sensitivity garbage. Anyone watches my channel knows that. But there is something that still feels awkward, and did at the time, even, for Fisher Stevens to be playing an Indian who throughout the film, though is great comic relief in doing so, feels like he's doing a bad impersonation of Apu Nahasapima Petalon from The Simpsons. Though this is sort of pre that, it's exactly what he's like. In fact, the sequel that came out 2 years later revolved entirely around his character. They did change the name from Ben Jabatuya to Ben something else, as though that made it better somehow to focus more of the film even around this guy in Indian makeup, and a very shoddy put together film, despite bringing in Cynthia Gibb and others. And there's a whole lot of everything thrown together about the robot, and it's really just a bad film. If you're a masochist, I advise watching the sequel because it is torture. The only chuckle it got out of me was when they were locked in a freezer truck of a Chinese restaurant, slowly freezing, and they open a fortune cookie and it says, "You bring warmth into people's lives," or something like that. That's about it. But the original Short Circuit was a great movie of its time. It's harder, like I say, to appreciate it now in hindsight because it's so dated in the technology and the circumstances of the Cold War. But for those of us that loved it at the beginning, we can still see how lovable that film was. That it is still, to us, it feels plausible that could have happened with our high-tech equipment in 1986. We can still cling to some of that suspension of disbelief that made it fun and enjoyable. I see there's buzz online all the time, intermittently, about when there's going to be a new one or when they're going to reboot it. The way Hollywood is these days and age, I don't know. Of course they're going to do it at some point. How sad, because it really, there's no way to do that. In the world we live in and all of the science fiction universes that have unfolded cinematically and on television between then and now, I don't know how you do this without it being colossally stupid. But the original one is great. It's out there. Check it out. Short Circuit, 1986.